My guest today is my Old Testament colleague, Dr. Dominick Hernandez, fluent in multiple languages, a passionate teacher, and delightful friend. We had a great time drinking quills driving around Louisville.
Cars, coffee, theology.
So I've been criticized for a couple episodes because we didn't get coffee.
I'll drink coffee.
Okay, good.
Watch, this
Right.
coffee will happen. I don't drink tea.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I'm Latino, so I grew up literally drinking coffee from a very young age.
Right. Okay.
It's
From
sort of-
childhood.
yeah.
Right, like Cuban. Is other countries?
So my
like,
mother would make what's called café colado,
Okay.
which is, there's actually sort of a sock thing that you
had
you
me
put
at
the
soccer.
coffee. Yeah, no, you put the coffee
Okay.
in this sort of the sock. It has a little
Right,
bit of a
yeah.
metal thing around the side. So you put the coffee in the sock,
Right.
and then you boil the coffee over the stove
Okay.
in the pot.
Okay.
And then you add the milk and the sugar all to
Yeah.
the one pot.
Okay.
It's called colado because the sock thing is called a colador, which it's like a strainer.
Yeah.
So I've been drinking that. My mother can make some great coffee like that.
So
And,
Latino children are caffeinated from a young age. That's
Absolutely,
good. That's
yeah.
a good thing.
I was just in New York 2 days ago, and my aunt, who's from Puerto Rico, made that for me.
Nice.
And
So it's comfort food, too,
It
probably,
is
in some
comfort
way.
food. Absolutely comfort food. Yeah.
That's awesome. You, like a lot of people, have seen other episodes, so you know what my first question is going to be. So,
Yes.
And that is, what was your first car?
1989 blue Ford Mustang.
Wow. Okay.
Got it for $500.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah.
what year did you get it? Was it pretty old? Or do you-
I got my license in 1997.
Okay.
When I was 17, so I was born in 1980, got it in 1997. It was sold to me by a man who was a missionary working with Campus Crusade, now Crew.
Crew missionary with a blue Mustang.
He did.
All right.
It wasn't a 5.0,
Right.
it was an SC, which I think
Yeah.
was like the
Right.
model for people that didn't want to drive fast.
Right.
It had a hatchback,
Okay.
so it was real cool.
Yeah.
I got it for $500.
Yeah, that's the deal.
Yeah, he was very kind to me.
This is in New York? Like
No,
you're driving
I was
around
living
New-
in the Philadelphia area at that
Okay,
time.
all right.
Yeah,
Right.
loved it. Crashed it.
Did you?
That's
oh,
what
no.
happened. Yeah, crashed
Oh,
it.
no.
A few years later, I went through a red light and got hit by a big truck.
So I thought about conducting this episode in Spanish, but I haven't taken Spanish since high school in my rural Illinois town of all white people. So my Spanish probably isn't too good. So then I thought maybe we could do it in modern Hebrew, but that would be even more of a disaster. So I think we'll just do it in English. Is that fine?
That's perfectly
Okay,
fine.
all
Thank
right.
you.
I know you would have been comfortable in all three of those.
I would have been okay with that, but
Okay.
English is fine as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. I appreciate that. So one of the things I've noticed, of course, with you being at our school now, which is great, is that modern Hebrew is part of your sort of vocabulary. I mean, it's part of what you do. You want to say something about that? How did that come about? Was that just from being in Israel, or before that, or
Yeah, well,
are you part of the Randall Booth cult?
that's funny. Well, actually, so I went to school at a school of, I initially started I did a degree in education, biobehavioral sciences before,
Okay.
an undergraduate degree before I started studying the Bible. And the reason why I started studying the scriptures formally was because I went to a church that taught through the scriptures expositionally,
Right.
and fell in love with the scriptures and wanted to learn how to do that. So I went to a school of ministry that was church-based. And when I was there, it's funny that you mentioned Randall Booth. While I was there, the professor that taught Hebrew there actually did the Randall Booth method
Okay,
there.
sure.
Now,
Which is very effective.
but as far as the sort of the scholarship portion is concerned, many great Western scholars don't know modern Hebrew that well, and so there's a lot of non-translated material. That's very good.
For the secondary literature.
Absolutely.
Hebrew
For
now.
secondary literature,
Right.
we're talking about professors from Tel Aviv and the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Ben Gurion in the Negev, obviously Bar Ilan where I went. These are Haifa, real research-oriented, research-based programs that have great professors that have studied in fabulous
And nobody's reading their
institutions
stuff
and a lot of
besides,
yeah. So I want to make sure, because of some of my background, that I do my best to push a lot of that great secondary literature.
And that's why we've talked about starting modern Hebrew
Absolutely.
at Southern as well,
Yeah.
right? So that they can have access to that kind of secondary
It
literature.
also helps with fluency in reading in biblical
Yeah, I'm
Hebrew.
sure,
I mean, people
right.
that would say that it doesn't, I don't know
Some
where
say
to
that
go
it
with
doesn't?
it. Some would
Really?
say that. Some would
Really?
say that it doesn't, that modern linguistics don't help that much. I just say, look at the alphabets.
Yeah.
They're the exact same alphabets.
right.
Look at a lot of the words. A lot of the words have changed meaning, but only slightly. They're sort of still in the same semantic range.
Right.
Syntax has changed some, but just look at the alphabet.
Right.
Look at fluency in reading. Recognizing without pointing and things like that really helps with reading.
Yeah.
So,
and I would imagine maybe especially for Hebrew relative to Greek, because the degree of foreignness of it to a Westerner is higher than the Greek, because Greek comes into Latin and then Latin into English.
and the right to left reading.
And so it seems like if you had some more familiarity with just how the language works when you go to read biblical Hebrew, it wouldn't feel quite so alien.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Hebrew, just the vocabulary alone felt so overwhelming.
Oh.
As you
Yeah.
well know.
Well,
That's why I made the Old Testament Hebrew vocabulary CDs.
yes, that's why you made them.
Not that my Hebrew is that good, actually.
No, but that
with the
helped me-
wrong pronunciation as well.
It's
I know,
okay.
so-
Well, what's wrong mean? I mean, there's a lot of different pronunciations. It's not the modern Israeli pronunciation, but
Right.
I wouldn't say it's wrong.
Right.
But it's not how I pronounce the words.
sure.
But it's justifiable.
Yeah.
So
Good. Sounds good. Reconstructed. All right. Let's get some coffee.
let's get some coffee.
All right. Here we go. Round two.
That's good.
How's the Americano?
Excellent.
Good. Very good.
No, this
yeah.
is good. You can't go wrong with quills.
Absolutely.
Man, this is good.
Man, maybe they'll give us some money for saying that. Say that again.
You can't go wrong with quills.
There we go.
That was good. Pound it out.
All right.
Do commercials together.
Exactly. Totally.
While I was at Princeton, that's when, so this was after the school ministry experience. It was after I fell in love with the languages. I thought to myself, if I want to get really, really good at languages, not just biblical languages, but also modern languages, if I want to get really, really good at languages, I really have to go kind of expose myself and live in this environment. And it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And then realize, like, if I'm going to go to a Jewish school,
Might as well go for it.
yeah, like let's try, and let's try like an Israeli Jewish school. I mean, I'll really get good at language there, and obviously, the Bible department alone at Bar Ilan has 18 people.
Wow.
That's just Bible department. That's not Semitic languages. That's not Land of Israel, archaeology. That's
Right.
none of that stuff. Just 18 professors of Bible there, right? All different types of experts, and one of what I would consider, a world-class scholar accepted me as his student, Professor Ed Greenstein. And that just was gonna be the best option for me.
I want to talk more specifically about your dissertation on Job.
Okay.
But before we do, I want to say to you, what made you think you should study Job as a PhD student? And here's why. My Old Testament professor at Trinity always said, Job is like the thing you study at the end of your career. You know what I mean? Just because it's so complex and so like it's, in my field, it would be John.
Yeah.
Like the Gospel of John is something you do at the kind of end of your career as a Gospels person, just because it's at the height of complexity, et cetera.
Yeah.
So what were you thinking? Job, come on, man.
Well, a few things. I think and maybe you give this type of advice to doctoral students coming in your position, but I think that my personal goals always needed to drive my professional goals, right? So my personal goal in all of this was very simple. Get really good at languages to teach them to other people.
Okay.
That was a personal goal, right?
But you didn't do like what a lot of times Christians do in Jewish universities. They study like lexical or linguistic issues. You didn't do that. I mean, you did a sort of theological or at least literary kind of argument, right?
Here's the thing. I'm one of the people that actually thinks that if you're going to do anything theological, you need to be good at languages.
Right.
Like you need to be really good. You need to know what the text is saying in order to explicate the meaning of that.
Right.
And so that's really what drove me to Job, because Job is, we do get the gist of the book, obviously, right? But it is a very interesting playground. There's a lot of
at the lexical and linguistic level, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, in the sense that you're going to need to study a lot of languages if you're going to try to get at the bottom of what some of those difficult words and phrases and metaphors.
Because it's poetic, right? I mean, that's the highest end of language is poetry. Yeah.
It is poetry, and it's difficult poetry.
Yeah.
And it's poetry in its ancient Near Eastern environment that has a lot of metaphors that plays on certain things.
Okay, well, let's turn to that. I'm going to have you do, as you probably have also seen in other episodes too, I'm going to have you read a random page out of the dissertation, which is good exercise. But can I take a stab at what I think you're arguing first?
Go for it.
And it is very well written, so this is pretty easy
That's
to do.
nice.
I mean, it was enjoyable, the parts. I didn't read the whole dissertation, but a lot of it. That we typically think of Job as a theodicy, and particularly a theodicy that's asking the question, why do righteous people suffer? Mm-hmm. You would agree that it's a complex theodicy, but you think that part of the key to understanding the whole complexity of the book of Job is to also ask the other side of that is why do the wicked prosper?
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that a fair evaluation?
I think
okay,
that's,
all right,
and
good.
wow, that's pretty good. So that's right on. I think that is really what causes major problems for him, not the fact that he could suffer.
Maybe even it's more primary.
Yeah, that ends up being
suffer.
right.
Okay.
Right. His friends continue to say, by the second round of speeches, they're especially saying, "No, you need to understand that you are suffering like a wicked person, and therefore you're wicked." And Job, by the time we get to chapter 21, says, "The wicked don't suffer like you say." Are you kidding me? Look at this, and he lists several things. I think in chapter 21.
Yeah. Right, especially that whole chapter on that, right?
Yeah. He lists a lot of the rhetoric. He makes reference to a lot of the rhetoric of his friends, and he combats that.
Right. Hey Siri, give me a number between 1 and 265.
Random number between 1 and 265 is 144.
Okay, so I didn't want you to stack the deck. So I had your dissertation bound, so.
Oh, yeah,
put that in
bound.
there. Yeah, well, at least spiral bound. So I'll give you this. Yeah, that's for you. And so if you'll turn to 144 and we'll read a paragraph and see if it makes any sense.
So let's see what happens.
See if you still agree with it.
All right, this is section 5.4, subsection 5.4.1. This is types of dissertations.
Yeah, totally.
The progeny of the wicked, according to Zophar, in verse 10, are eventually responsible for repaying the poor. This is good. Banav yiratzu dalim. That which is repaid is not yet mentioned, but what is implied is that the conduct of the wicked affecting subsequent generations is noted by Bildad, so, Zophar's buddy, in chapter 8, verses 16, 17, and 19, which is the previous chapter. The parallel statement in verse 10b declares that the wicked's hands return their own wealth, v'yadav tishevna ono, presumably to the poor. Thus, Zophar asserts that the wicked cannot impart their riches to their posterity, but rather, in a humiliating act conceding invalid ownership of their possessions, the irreligious and subsequent generations become enslaved to the exploited poor until they make restitution for the riches they unjustly attained. Yes, I still agree with that interpretation.
Okay, good. Can you give us a layman's interpretation of that?
Yeah. So basically, thank you for the layman's interpretation. Right. This needs to eventually come out in a sort of a more popular form. But here's one of the themes that we see throughout Job's friends' speeches and then subsequent accusations of him. What they say is the rich man, and this shows up elsewhere. I mean, we see in the ancient Near East and in other sections of the Bible, the rich man loses his possessions.
Eventually.
Right. And we get to, the wicked rich man, that's what I meant to say.
Right.
Eventually loses his possessions. And the reason is because in many cases, the rich man's possessions are ill-gotten.
Yeah.
All right, so we see a lot of metaphors, and that is what Zophar is getting at initially here. This is just the beginning of the chapter. By the end of the chapter, what he ends up saying is the wicked person regurgitates them. So the wicked person, it's obviously a metaphor, right? But the wicked person tries to attain and maintain ill-gotten gain,
and that's
but he can't keep it down.
And right. So it's a more nuanced argument than if you were righteous, you wouldn't be suffering. This is a more nuanced that's sitting on your thesis.
This is Job. Remember chapter 1 and chapter 2? You lost everything.
Yeah.
You lost your kids, which is another one of these.
So it must mean that you're wicked.
It must mean, right. You've lost everything.
Yeah.
There's a few other themes, right? The loss of children is another one. Wicked people lose their children, or they don't have big families. So infertility is a big deal, right?
I saw that in there,
Right.
Okay.
So they lose their families, they lose their children. If they do have children, then they'll eventually lose them. If they have riches, then they'll lose them. Why? Because it's ill-gotten, and those are blessings from God.
So that's the sign, and this is the logic of the detractors always is because this is true, therefore you must be bad, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
There is a uniform system that is always, according to Job's friends, that is always in effect of just retribution.
Right.
If you lose your children, it is a clear sign of this. It is a clear sign that you are wicked. If you lose your wealth and your riches, if you've regurgitated them, and if you had them or you never had them, this is a clear sign that you are wicked. Here's the ends justifying the actual kind of situation. Nature of the person.
Right. Okay. So all of this, aside from just your thesis, kind of I can pull up a level to the significance of this. Again, my, New Testament scholars' understanding of Job, so that's limited, has been that Job really serves as a critique of an overly proverbish kind of formulaic way of thinking of living, which you could get from Deuteronomy, maybe not rightly so, but certainly you could get from just kind of a general wisdom. If you do right, it's going to go well for you. If you do poorly, it's going to go poorly. That's not exactly what you're addressing, but I think in your suggestions for further research, I think one of the points you raised, if I understood you correctly, concerned this issue of, is that what Job's about? Is it a critique of the wisdom literature within wisdom literature?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
Could it be a critique
What do you think about
common ways of thinking in the ancient Near East, which I
so
think,
that's a little different than not a critique of wisdom literature within. I've always kind of thought of it as like it's a bit of a critique of wisdom literature within the Bible itself. To kind of say, hey, don't overdo it on this kind of formulaic understanding. Right?
You could conceivably understand it that way. We do understand that even the wisdom literature that we have in the Bible, that sounds like other ancient Near Eastern literature, still has the name Yahweh's, the name of God's stamp on it, right? Anything that's reappropriated is reappropriated.
Yeah, for sure.
In the name of the one true God of Israel.
Yep.
But I think that where there's even a more stark contrast is comparing Job against ancient Near Eastern material.
Right.
Because when you start to do that, you realize first and foremost, if there was any innocent sufferer, it was Job, and it's not any of the ancient Near Eastern stuff. So it's not the sufferer in the Babylonian Theodicy, the sufferer in Lulu, all these other types of things.
Which you say something about that.
Right.
Like there's no real parallel to Job in that sense.
Scholars have been saying that for a long time. There's no real parallel. And what this does is it demonstrates that sort of the trite theology of the ancient Near East, whereas if I didn't properly sacrifice, that's why something bad is happening to me. All of sort of that type of theology doesn't work with the God of Israel because he's in control of all of this to the point where we're able to get this view behind the scenes in the prologue, chapters 1 and 2, where the God of Israel is in charge of everything that's happening.
Okay. So it would be a critique of anyone within Israel who held to that equally kind of formulaic, flat-footed view, but you're saying like Job's friends, right? But so it is within Israel too. But you're saying a big part of the context is Israel's God over against other sort of metaphysics in the ancient Near East that would be too formulaic.
I do think that the dialogues could be viewed that way, or sort of the main. One of the main points of the dialogue could be read that way. Yes.
Okay. So let me ask a question that's related to all this again, kind of pulling up at a level. How do you describe to your students what the role of ancient Near Eastern parallels are in our understanding of the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Either at a scholarly level or even just scholars kind of boiling that down for us. What good do A&E parallels sort of do for us?
That's a great question. This is a great question. There's no short answer, to be honest with you.
Sure.
I think, first of all, the reason why we have to ask this question is because there's almost immediate, I guess we could say, pushback against utilizing ancient Near Eastern material. From an evangelical perspective, pushback against using ancient Near Eastern materials because we do believe that the Bible is very unique. There's a knee-jerk reaction, I think, for those people that really honor the Bible to say it's almost irreverent to compare it to other literature. That's what I'm trying to get at. And what I think is there are two major reasons why it's important to do this.
Yeah.
Maybe even more than this. Let me just start giving the reasons. First and foremost, the ancient Israelites were ancient Near Easterners as well. Right? Now, this is easier for us to do in the New Testament because with New Testament studies, we do realize that Second Temple Jews were Second Temple Jews, so we have no problem with reading other Second Temple Jewish literature outside of the Bible. Right. But ancient Israel, they weren't all Second Temple Jews. What type of literature did we turn to? We turned to other ancient Near Eastern literature. A lot of it sounds very similar because a lot of it was written in very similar languages that dealt with a lot of the same questions. Why do human beings suffer? Where did the world come from? If there was some type of remnant of this universal flood or this local flood or with this flood, there was a flood. How do we explain that? These types of things. There is a thought world in the ancient Near East that sometimes we're very open to accept when it comes to the New Testament. Oh yeah, read the Dead Sea Scrolls, read the Apocrypha Pseudepigrapha. Like we sort of kind of accept that we sort of push back against when it comes to the Old Testament and Hebrew Scriptures.
Well, before I want to hear your second answer too, but I think the analog to that in New Testament is the Greco-Roman background, right? Where you get this, I think, not helpful, but you get this similar pushback. Like, yeah, it's okay to read the New Testament in light of Second Temple Judaism, but you start reading in light of Greco-Roman philosophy and culture, hold on. But that's just as much a part of the culture, or I don't mean to make a quantitative amount, but it's a part of the culture of the New Testament as well. And after all, the New Testament's written in Greek, not in Hebrew, right? So I think there is an analog in the New Testament.
Absolutely.
For sure.
We believe in a God that speaks in the language of the people, right? And so ultimately having done this through Jesus, coming as a Jewish man, and I think that we see that same type of precedent as we study extra-biblical literature alongside of literature, that the people that would have received this literature would have understood it. Yeah. They would have been familiar with what was going on. And that's one of the major things that studying extra-biblical literature helps us out with.
So you said there were a couple of reasons. What would be the other reason why A&E parallels are
Big
important?
issue. This is so helpful. Ancient Near Eastern Semitic languages. I mean, think of this. Out of all of the years that ancient Israel was writing, the Hebrew Bible, and then the 269 verses that are in Aramaic, out of all the years, we have this much. That's all we have, right? From creation to Moses, to down all the way through the last. This is how much we have. Right. Now, think about that in comparison to the plethora of tablets that were found in from ancient Mesopotamia.
I think most of us don't have a sense of that. Is there a lot?
Yes, Akkadian corpus is very big, and Ugaritic as well, and Aramaic documents and other sort of Canaanite or I guess we could say Proto-Canaanite literature. Now you start to talk in those terms, and we realize that extra biblical stuff can really help us linguistically. Yeah, totally. There are certain things that we didn't really understand very well until the emergence of some of these Semitic languages. And think, not until Ugaritic, which is a language that's very close, on the Levant, right? Ugarit's on the Levant. That language wasn't discerned until it wasn't founded until 1929. Wow. It didn't even make it in one of the standard Hebrew dictionaries that we have, the BDB. Right. So just think about how much we can still learn from ancient Semitics, ancient compositions, all of these.
Would modern Jewish, that's helpful, would modern Jewish scholars acknowledge that these other A&E languages are pretty crucial, or absolutely. I guess those are going to vary by a scholar. No, they would.
Absolutely. Okay. There isn't a scholar religious scholar, and I studied with religious people. There isn't a religious scholar that's going to say Akkadian's not important. Okay. No, like, so oh my gosh.
There's not like a protecting. No, we know what these words mean. Okay.
No way.
All right. Okay.
No, like, let's be honest. This makes complete sense. Yeah. Akkadian has a very large corpus. There's a large corpus of Akkadian literature. The Akkadian, ancient Mesopotamian writers wrote in a Semitic language, Eastern Semitic language, but it's it's close. It's not a Northwestern Semitic language like Hebrew, but it's close. They dealt with a lot of the same issues that we see pop up in the Bible, creation, these types of things. Just thinking sort of logically, like, of course this stuff is going to help us understand words and phrases that are difficult in the Bible. Right. Let's read this stuff side by side and see if we can glean whatever we can glean. It's our responsibility as biblicists to understand those words and phrases and sentences and paragraphs and chapters as much as possible so that we can best explicate the message of those words. Sure. We believe in those words. We believe that there's life in those words. That's what we actually believe about those words.
The words exist in a context.
Exactly. And
context.
It's our responsibility to figure out what they mean, to explain them to people.
Okay. Cool.
So we should use anything that we can to help us.
Excellent.
I'm preaching to the choir here, but
that's okay. No,
whatever.
It's good. I mean, my knowledge of ancient Near Eastern isn't nearly
passionate about this stuff.
Good. That's good. If you'll grab an envelope out of the side pocket there, and as you may know, the routine, there's going to be a random question in there, and we'll both answer it. You go first.
Right.
Goes red. Okay.
Red, but I like to think this is more magenta.
Yeah. Yes. So we'll go with dark magenta.
Dark magenta. Yeah. I just wanted to say magenta.
Yes, that's a good word.
Okay, moment of truth. If there were an apocalypse, could you hunt for your own food?
All right.
So here's the short answer. Absolutely not. Okay. I could hunt
You're a Philadelphia boy. You guys don't hunt in the inner city of Philadelphia?
I could hunt for my own food in the pantry as canned goods. That's about it. For me, I've never handled a gun. I've never shot a gun. Okay. I've never shot a bow and arrow, other than archery at summer camp when I was a kid. I don't think I would be able to recognize, besides cows and deer, what is actually edible
Right.
that's out there. So I don't know if I could even recognize edible plants. So, you know,
So you're dead, basically. So
let's just hope that pre-tribulationists are correct, and that there is a pre-tribulation rapture, and that I get raptured up and I never have to hunt for my own food
there
if
you
there's
go.
any type
We'll
of,
go with that.
Yeah.
So that's why you're a pre-trib person.
Yeah,
Because of the
that's
hunting
right.
issue.
The hunting.
Right.
Yes, it's very convenient for me.
So, okay, for me, I maybe had a little bit more experience with guns. Not much at all, though. But I do have a cat that is an amazing hunter. So if I could sort of somehow get this cat to hunt for me and then deliver it. Like, I went out yesterday morning and there was a rabbit twice the size of our cat, a rabbit carcass dead there, right between my house and the car, with most of its head eaten off. So that was my cat's doing, and that cat has killed bats, chipmunks, squirrels, rabbits over the years. So maybe if my cat lives in the apocalypse, I'll be good to go.
Brother,
you can come over.
If your hope is waiting for your if your hope is your cat to hunt for you during the apocalypse, bats and mice and chipmunks, I'd rather die in the
Rabbits.
apocalypse. Yeah,
Rabbits.
I'd rather die in the apocalypse.
Okay, I'll only invite you over the rabbits to you. Everything else. Tastes like chicken. Come on.
Can it do real chicken? Chicken wings.
So our vast New Testament and Old Testament knowledge will die with us in the apocalypse, it sounds like. So.
Well, it won't. It'll be recorded.
Right. Okay, good. Yeah, there we go. That's why we're doing this, just in case there's an apocalypse. We'll have it. So. Well, man, this has been as delightful as I anticipated.
Hopefully
it was
you got
gonna
some
be.
good
It's been
conversation.
great. Yeah,
I hope that this has been worthwhile for you.
Absolutely. It's been great.
And hopefully it gets
Welcome back.
edited to the point where I sound good.
Yeah.
You always sound good.
We do voice modulation. We put masks on us, so it's going to be awesome. So.
Yeah, I'll
So
finally
good.
look good too.
Right.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. 3 really quick things. If you like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and connect with us on social media. We'd really appreciate it. Secondly, check out the comments section below. We've put a bunch of program notes and links to interesting things there. And third, check out some of our episodes you can see linked here. Thanks. We'll see you on the road. Peace.